Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review of Star Trek Lower Decks Season 2, Episode 8, I Excretus. This video is part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek Lower Decks, so I have to start with a spoiler warning for Lower Decks up to the latest episode, Season 2, Episode 8. So, this was a really funny episode that I really enjoyed. And, you know, a lot of times I'll harp on people who say Star Trek episodes are fun, but I think it's different for Lower Decks, because Lower Decks is a comedy show. It's meant to be funny, it's meant to be fun, and usually when normal Star Trek shows that are intentionally supposed to be dramatic or exciting or adventurous or intense, try to be funny or fun. Usually they're just really stupid. A few exceptions. But it's different for Lower Decks. Lower Decks is a different standard because it is a comedy show. So when I say this episode of Lower Decks is really fun, that's actually a huge compliment, because that's what the show does right. That's what it's mainly about. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be funny. And I think this episode accomplishes that extremely well. And of course, it also does what Lower Decks does best, is have tons and tons of Star Trek references. It's always my favorite kind of episodes, the ones that just throw all these references throughout Star Trek that most, usually only the big Star Trek geeks, such as myself, will catch most of these. For someone who's not familiar at all with Star Trek, it would all just go over their head and just be normal. But I always appreciate that a lot as well, and this episode had a lot of that. But I will say, this is really in contrast to last week's episode, which I really liked, because that episode, it was kind of humorous. I liked it and enjoyed it, but it wasn't like a fun episode the way that this episode is. And but it did more to advance like the character arcs and the character stories, and I thought worked as a serious episode as well as a funny episode. Whereas this week's episode, I think the plot was cliche sitcom-ish, and I actually thought it got really stupid at the end as far as the plot goes, and it didn't really do much to advance the characters at all. But it was hilarious. And it had all the Star Trek references. Maybe it did a little to advance the character stories, but not much, and definitely not as much as last week's episode did. And so I don't think it works as a serious Star Trek episode the way that last week's episode did, which is probably why I actually prefer last week's episode. But this was definitely the funnier episode, funnier episode. So anyway, God, where to begin? Like this episode is so jam-packed with references. The first one we get, so when our four main lower deckers are out repairing a ship, and they're enjoying the sights, and we hear that on the bridge that the helms person, that Trill, gets a distress call that a ship is caught in a causality loop, and then they get the distress call again and again and again. And the White Freeman's like, "Yep, that sounds like a time loop, all right." See, I love that. It's hilarious because Lower Decks does this a lot, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, in my opinion anyway, where they'll take one episode or a theme that reoccurs maybe a couple times within Star Trek and have the characters in this show act like it's an everyday normal occurrence. Now sometimes they do it kind of pisses me off. I'm like, no, like the whole thing with Shax, which I'm not going to get into. Treating that like a normal everyday occurrence kind of pissed me off. But in this case with the time loop, I thought it was hilarious. This time I think it works. Like, oh yeah, it's a time loop, all right. And so they just leave. And I love how Freeman has apparently decided on the warp me as a permanent. Like, let's go into warp thing. Warp me. and so it's funny how I thought this opening scene worked very well, because it was very funny where Tendy's like, oh yeah, I'm sure we'll be fine, and then they just cut to 6 hours later and they're like near death. And it really, really actually does illustrate how terrible of a captain that Freeman is. Now, later Freeman tries to justify it to say, oh, you didn't, log your boots or whatever, so implying to me that they didn't know, that they didn't officially, the lower deckers didn't officially let the ship know that they were out and on thing, which, if she's correct, that is actually a big deal, and it doesn't make it partly their fault. But still, even whether or not it's officially logged or not, she should be aware if members of her crew aren't on her ship. And it seemed like it was an official mission too, because they were repairing a ship. And I don't know, they didn't really clarify whether or not that mission was sanctioned, but it does seem like, and I talked about this in previous episodes before, how Freeman's really portrayed as a bad captain. And of course, but this actually ties into the plot later, because we find out, although they say this is why, actually that's a plot hole, because they said the instructor comes on and says that's why, part of the reason why she picked this ship was because, you left your crew out and warped away and left them out in space to die. But when they rescue the crew 6 hours after, they were left out, Freeman immediately says, we're having your drill instructor come on. So that heavily implies this drill instructor has already been prearranged to come, unless she didn't just pop up the instant that she heard of this incident before the incident actually was finished being resolved. So yeah, that was a bit of a plot hole, but really I don't care. It's a comedy. It's a comedy show. I'm willing to give it a lot of leeway. Now we meet the instructor, who is based off of a character Bim from the animated series, in an episode called Bim. Now, when I did my countdown of top 10 best and top 5 worst episodes of the animated series, Bim was, I think, number 3 in my worst list. I really hated that episode. I thought the character was dumb. The way that he's separated into 3 different things, and he always says this one, but I actually love how they're making fun of that episode. To be clear, I wouldn't tolerate any, or would not tolerate, but I really wouldn't like any continuation or reference to that alien species or that character in any normal Star Trek show, because I just thought that episode was so terrible. But I completely appreciate it in Lower Decks, because Lower Decks is meant to be silly and ridiculous, and in fact sort of poking fun at previous episodes. So I love that they poke fun at that character, the way the drill instructor always says this one, the way that Vim did. Oh my god, that was a terrible episode. Anyway, and so they have all these simulation, and the whole let's switch the lower deckers or be the senior crew, and the senior crew would be the lower deckers. So felt like a very sort of sitcom-y thing to do, like a normal thing. Let's see how the other shoe fits. And they did sort of fall into this cliche a little bit, but they didn't harp on it, that, this is how the other side lives, I can't appreciate this, and blah, 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 was kind of like the normal sort of sitcom trope. But they didn't, as I said, they didn't harp on it too much, and you find out that when they thought, that's the whole point of this exercise, and apparently it wasn't. But anyway, I'll get back to that. So anyway, we see all these different scenarios that on this board, which I didn't realize. I watched a couple of YouTube videos that pointed it out, so I went back to the episode that paused the scene. I saw the board of all the different titles of the different simulations, and they're all, of course, titles of Star Trek episodes, or most of them are. There are a few that aren't. There's one that says Q to Q or something, but most of them they'll have references to Star Trek. And I think, and one is Tribble Troubles instead of the Trouble with Tribbles, but other ones are flat out episodes like Evolution and Cause and Effect and Naked Time. And they had one, Time Trap, which is actually the title of a animated series episode. So again, some animated series references. And then the Chain of Command was on there and stuff like that, which it's fun. I kind of like those Easter eggs things that are just there. You obviously, most people aren't really going to notice it on just a casual viewing. You sort of have to pause it or pay attention or whatever. But anyway, We get into the different scenarios, which I thought were hilarious. I love seeing like Mariner in the Mirror Universe. It's like, oh, I can be evil. Like that's a kind of like great use of Mariner. And the way that, she was trying to figure out what to do, but got caught by Boimler because she saluted with the wrong arm. And I love, of course, all the male characters in the Mirror Universe all has facial hair of some sort. Oh, that trope never gets old. That joke making fun of that Spock's goatee never gets old. Anyway, and then there was the Western one, which of course, because Star Trek always goes to Western. You think of the original series, you think of episodes like Spectre of the Gun, but then there's also Fistful of Datas and Next Gen. But more recently, there's also the episode North Star in Enterprise, which I actually think was the worst of this because that Western thing was so contrived and out of nowhere. But anyway, that's the episode I thought of when I thought of this Western theme, because it just went to his Western planet and she couldn't even get on the horse and nowhere. This is a bit like ridiculous kind of humor, especially how they keep harping back on that. Like when the instructor revealed later that all the simulations were rigged, she's like, oh, so that's why the horse attacked me. She's like, no, actually I didn't rig that one, I never got around to it. Just implying that this Mariner did such a bad job. And then of course we get the Naked Time reference to the episode. Now, I saw this more because they had all the writing, like the people writing stuff on the walls, which they did in the Naked Time episode. However, I found overall this scene was making fun of the Naked Now more than the Naked Time, because the Naked Now, everyone just got really horny and wanted to screw each other. And here we actually flat out see everyone just naked and having sex with each other right out in the open. And I had mentioned before, because early in the season they had hinted at Mariner being pansexual, and I was like, we actually need to see this rather than just mention it. But here they do touch on it more, because she's actually off put by all this random sex until she sees these two women making out, and she actually goes, oh, so like that actually interests her. So yeah, so now that is a callback to the fact that she is in fact pansexual. But of course the mood is completely ruined where Boimler jumps on the counter and gets way too revealing, and then Shax and Katana just flat out Naked Time just run through the hallways having sex. And they had with that Stevens, that guy who's like the butt kisser to Ransom, they're like doing nasty stuff as well. She's like, get me out of here, I don't care if I fail, why is the simulation still going? Like, that was hilarious. Absolutely loved that. Now, I will say, I do appreciate this episode on another level, which is why I said there is a bit of a character development here. Is because one of the things I always harped on a lot is the fact that Mariner was always portrayed as really perfect and Boimler's this bumbling idiot. And they kind of, especially in season 1, they kind of hammered down that too much, and that really annoyed me, especially when they kept going back to it, which is why I kind of appreciated the previous episode with the supercomputer, because Boimler is the one who got them out of the situation. But here they further do that because they actually show that Mariner is failing all of her tests miserably, and Boimler is actually the only one who is succeeding at his tests. And so again, that subverts the trope of Mariner's perfect and Boimler's an idiot, and the kind of the flipping that, and I like that. I love it. Please do more of that. I mean, you don't have to if they completely flip it where Mariner's the idiot now and Boimler's always right, then that's not going to be any better. But to have a dynamic there where it's not always the same thing. So I do like subverting that. So that's another thing I appreciated about this episode, because of course Boimler's story was that he would succeed, but he wouldn't get a perfect score, and so he's like a perfectionist where he'd be like, do it again, because it is showing a character flaw in Boimler, that he's such a overachiever and wants to do everything perfectly, that he would risk doing everything right and risk, the whole thing just for the aspect of a perfect score. And I love that whole sequence with the Borg, and they play, and I love how he said, "Oh, look, you're a Borg, go say the thing," and after it says resistance, oh, that's awesome, and then starts shooting them and like running off, and as I said, doing a really good job, but it's not perfect, so he keeps going back in. He's like, okay, I'll save the Borg kids, and then it ups his score, but it's still not perfect, so it's like, alright, I'll take some Borg hostages and save the Borg kids, and it only ups it by 1%. He's like, damn it. And then eventually, like, they cut back to him later where he's like defeated the Borg queen in chess. He blows up the Borg ship and he gets away with like the Borg kids and all his hostages, and I'm like, wow, I can't believe you accomplished that. And it was still only like a 97 or 94% score, and he's like, do it again, and the computer's like, no, you're in the top percent, you're in the top 10% of scores. And he's like, I don't care. And that's great comedy because it really exaggerates his sort of tendency to want to overachieve and be a perfectionist or whatever. So even though it was a bit ridiculous for his character, I think it worked in the comedy sense. So I actually really appreciated that as well. Now then, the Tendi thing with that was obviously making fun of the episode Ethics, which I didn't mind because I thought that was a stupid episode where Worf was paralyzed and wanted to kill himself. But here, I don't know. I thought the way they did it was stupid. This joke didn't work for me. The way that he was like, kill me, and like her score kept going down because she wouldn't kill him, which is kind of missing the point of the episode, because the episode was a bit more, it was examining a moral dilemma, all facets of this, where here they're just saying, oh, you just need to kill him and do what he says, which is not in fact what the point of Ethics was, that showed the episode. And so, and the joke here is when the EMTs came to, so why is he still alive? Oh no, it's too late, he's alive. Like, that was dumb, like having the reverse of those two ladies dead, but time of life, 900 hours or something. And I was like, I'm sorry, that was stupid. I didn't think that was really funny. I was like, come on, that was a bit too over the top for me. But the Rutherford one, where it was the Wrath of Khan situation, where he's trying to get into the thing to sacrifice himself. That was funny. I like how he couldn't open the door, and they're like, "Oh, this shouldn't be hard to open the door." and eventually, it's like, "Oh, I finally got it open," and the ship just exploded. Like, that was hilarious. Now, and the stuff when the senior officers did it, and they were just having the stacked crates, like, that was kind of dumb. But there were funny moments in it, though. Even though I thought the whole point of them trying to learn to be lower deckers I wasn't interested in that, though. That was dumb, but there were some funny jokes in that, such as how Shax points out, so why are these crates shaped like this if they're supposed to be stacked, which is making fun of TNG, the crates that would always fall in there. And then that random commander dude who would just show up like in a Robin Hood outfit, and it was like, have you seen Q? And they're like, what, Q's here? It's like, don't worry about it. And, oh, the Jem'Hadar are attacking, and just runs off. Oh my god. So there were funny moments in that. So I did find this episode hilarious. But as I said, the plot the plot of the episode really lost me is when they revealed that that it was an evil plot by the instructor to try to fail the crew and get them all reassigned so that she can make herself look better, because everyone always passed her test too easily in other ships. So she purposely chose a ship that they looked like they wouldn't pass and made it harder for them to pass. There's something very sitcom-y about it. But what I liked even less was their resolution to scare her into going to all these dangerous situations, putting the ship in direct danger, and they're acting like, oh shit, we do this shit all the time, we don't care. And she was like freaking out and yelling. I do like the crystalline entity references. We've seen more crystalline entities or whatever, but and then they kind of like the weird effects when they went to the black hole where they were like phasing out. That reminded me of when they were in the wormhole in Star Trek The Motion Picture. But anyway, yeah, oh yeah, and then there was earlier there was the reference to Star Trek 3 where with the scenario they were doing with the crew together was the Star Trek 3 save Spock in the Genesis planet, but they were arguing with each other, so he just smashed into the space dock doors. That was hilarious. But anyway, yeah, the ending I didn't care for it. From a logical like plot perspective, I thought it was really dumb. But you know, that's kind of comedy episodes like this. Is the plot isn't really the point. The humor is the point, and the humor was amazing. The humor really, really worked. And then. So they get, they had Boimler continue his simulation because in order to keep things going, and so he actually got to the point where he failed, and he got assimilated, and they, we get a reference to the Borg Queen. They actually had the same actress from First Contact who played her, and then do the First Contact reference where she blows on it, kind of like the same way she did with Data, which that was okay, but I don't like the Borg Queen, so. I don't know. I didn't really appreciate seeing her, but it was kind of fun. I think the thing they said earlier about I defeated the Borg Queen just like that was hilarious. I think this scene kind of undermines that. But then of course he thinks like he's assimilated and had to break him out of the simulation, and he's still like traumatized from it. And I did think it was kind of funny because they ended the episode with it was a very original series-esque where the episode would end with the characters making a stupid joke and going, ha ha ha, isn't that funny, blah blah blah, which always pissed me off about the original series, but hey, it was made in the 60s. and it was a very common sitcom trope to make it all the characters laughing at it or as the episode ends. But then they have Boimler say, oh, I can't remember exactly what he said, but it's something like, oh, my life is ruined or something. That was funny because it subverted that whole trope of ha ha ha. They were just ignoring the fact that Boimler's obviously traumatized by what he went through. So it was okay. Anyway, my rating for I Excretus out of 10, I'm gonna give this an 8. Extremely good. It was a really funny, really enjoyable episode. I had a lot of fun with it. I enjoyed it. It doesn't get a 9 or a 10 for me because it was, it was just the humor, and the plot was actually kind of dumb, and I thought the revelation at the end was really contrived and stupid, and how they scared her into it was really sitcom-y. It got a bit too sitcom-y at times. And I prefer, episodes of Lower Decks that, as I said in last week's episode, that straddle the line better, which I thought last week's episode did better between humor and a serious episode. That being said, though, this episode was one of the funniest episodes of the show. So it definitely gets an 8, at least an 8, for has hilarious and all the Star Trek references and everything like that. And of course, it is a comedy show, so I do appreciate it for being funny. Anyway, that is it for my review of the latest Lower Decks episode. I shall be back next week and every week after to finish covering this season of Lower Decks. And you can check out my channel for many more Star Trek videos, also videos on other shows like The Expanse, Better Call Saul, Star Wars, Clone Wars, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.